Welcome, Kim.
Welcome, Karyn.
Hey, listen.
Oh.
I get it. These stories I've been telling, they've been a real hoot and a holler, but I know what you're thinking.
Uh-huh.
You're thinking how unimpressive it is that the earliest we've ever discussed about my ancestors is in the 1600s.
Yeah, I was going to talk to you about that.
You want to know about my ancestry pre-colonialism.
Mhm.
You want that medieval knowledge.
Yes.
Maybe even that ancient connection.
Yeah,
I get it.
that's what I've been waiting for.
Me too. I have some tough news.
Yep, uh-huh.
Ancestry gets pretty hard to prove when you start heading into the days where almost no one could read or write. You run out of primary documents pretty quick.
Sure, yeah. That tracks.
But that doesn't stop people from trying. I mean, the point of genealogy is to find your roots. So genealogists over the years have worked really, really hard to find those deep, deep roots. Deep roots using what historical proof they have. And in this bonus episode, I'd like to take us on a little adventure into the squishiest part of genealogy. We don't have documents to prove anything.
Yeah.
Just vibes,
Okay.
guesses, and the deep desire to place ourselves within the annals of history.
Okay.
And through all of that, I'm going to claim to you, Kim, that I know who my ancestors were as far back as the early 700s AD.
700s?
700s.
You can't possibly.
Well, then I'm going to disprove it.
Okay. Okay, great.
First, I'm going to prove it, and then I'm going to walk it back.
Okay, cool.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, so we're going to spend a whole episode just to undo it.
So this is kind of what I love, is that history is made up sometimes.
Yeah. Well, the history is not made up. My connection to it is.
Well, and the interpretations of history are made up sometimes.
Totally. You are actually going to love this episode because we're going to rip genealogy a new one.
Yeah, I'm so ready.
All right, let's begin. On my mother's side, her paternal grandfather's mother had the maiden name of Dickinson. So that's my second great-grandmother. Dickinson, of course, is a pretty common surname. And it's been a source of consternation for me because I'm only able to trace this branch back to like 1820 or something. Nothing crazy. I just hit a brick wall like many a genealogist before me, and I can't seem to crack it further at the minute yet. Genealogy is a lifelong sport. However, in my search to find documentation in the names of my actual ancestors in this line, I learned something very interesting about the origin of the Dickinson name. I learned it while reading about the Dickinson family reunion of 1883 in Amherst, Massachusetts, which is how you say that state.
Mm-hmm.
When you picture a family reunion, Kim, what do you picture?
I actually picture the Addams family reunion.
Oh, good.
And summer camp.
Have you ever been to like a actual family reunion?
No. Actually, no. I don't think so.
That's
Maybe when I was
crazy.
younger.
That is crazy. We had to go to a bunch of them. So what I picture is like a rented out pavilion and like a local park with 20 people awkwardly eating store-bought cake.
Yep, okay.
Yeah, that's
That
what I
also
picture.
tracks. Yeah.
The Dickinson family reunion in 1883 was not that.
Was it fancier or less fancy?
It was big.
Ooh.
So I don't know the final number of attendees, but there were 57 people on the planning committee.
Oh my God.
And preparations were made to accommodate around 400 people.
Oh my God.
Invites were sent out all over New England and New York, calling on anyone and everyone who could trace their lineage back to the first American Dickinson, Nathaniel Dickinson, who arrived in 1637.
Wow.
It's a lot of people.
Whew.
And just to reiterate, I don't actually know 100% if I can trace mine back to this guy. However, it is pretty likely, I think, that I am related to him because you don't just end up like a white Protestant family in upstate New York without most likely having New England origins. So I can't prove it on paper yet, but the chance that it's going to lead back to him is really likely.
Okay, so this is one that is actually potentially true.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So Nathaniel Dickinson, really good chance I'm related to him.
Okay.
I just don't have all the documents yet. The events of the first day of the reunion were planned out like it was a church service.
Mhm.
There was concert with hymns, lectures, poems, prayers, you know, family reunion stuff.
Yeah, no potato sack races though.
No, but the second day was like an outdoor outing.
Cute.
They had all the attendees went to the graveyard of Nathaniel Dickinson together.
Aw.
And then they went to drink from the old well on the Dickinson homestead.
Oh my God.
They drank like musty 1600 water.
Family is so touching. It's so moving.
Just 400 people probably drinking from the same ladle.
Probably getting so sick afterwards. Oh my goodness.
And then they all had dinner together.
It's kind of spooky.
It's weirdly like for these very Protestant families, it does feel very like ritualistic, like coven stuff.
I like that.
Yeah. It was quite the production.
Mm-hmm.
So much so that they wrote a book about it a year later, and they have transcriptions of every speech and like descriptions of their activities, which is how I know about this. It was in one such speech that a speaker told the story of the origin of the Dickinsons. And that story begins in the Norwegian countryside in the early 700s with a little shepherd boy named Ivar.
Oh,
Little Ivar.
Ivar.
But Kim, here's what else is happening in the world in the 700s AD.
Here, wait, go.
I chose to do the whole century and not 1 year in the 700s.
Well, I
think that
would
was
imagine it's not quite as hip hopping as 1870,
it could be
whatever.
People just weren't writing about it.
Yeah.
So in the 700s,
yeah, hit me.
it's estimated that Beowulf is written in this century.
Oh, yeah.
Makes sense, right?
Yeah.
The Byzantine Empire is beefing with what looks like, and let me check my notes here, the entire Arab world.
We love a beef.
Yeah,
Big fans of beef.
huge beef. The Iberian Peninsula in southern Spain is invaded by an army from across the Strait of Gibraltar in northern Africa, ending the Visigoth rule and bringing in centuries of Muslim rule in that area in southern Spain.
Visigoth sounds like a bad name.
I love the name Visigoth.
It's really good.
China's first and only empress, Wu Zetian, she's overthrown. Well, I mean, you know.
Yeah.
She broke that glass ceiling.
Yeah, she did. And then they broke the whole structure.
Exactly. And then the first Viking attack on England ever recorded occurs.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Okay, kind of a big century. I was going to say big year, but...
A big 100 years.
It's a big 100 years.
This last one about the Viking attack in England is mildly relevant because we're going back to Norway, famously a place where Vikings were.
Mm-hmm.
Our protagonist, Ivar the shepherd boy.
And he's how old? Do we know?
Oh, why would we know that?
No,
you know what I'm saying? He's a boy on a mountain.
He's just a boy existing with his goats. Goats? Sheep?
You know, it doesn't say.
Oh.
I assumed sheep because shepherd.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Could be a goat, though.
Could be a goat herd.
He was minding his business one day when he was then promptly kidnapped by some Swedes who, for some unknown reason, threw him on their ship. And then, as Swedish Vikings do, they took him on a world tour back to Sweden, to Iceland, and perhaps even New England, they state.
Whoa.
So he gets back to Norway. And then just as thoughtlessly as the Swedes have grabbed him, they let him go. And he's back in Norway.
What? For why?
We don't know.
Okay.
He just did. He just does, Kim.
What?
He just, that makes sense.
Yep.
But by this time, Ivar's older. He's become a pretty good warrior with his, kidnapped travels.
Mm-hmm.
And he shows up in the King of Norway's court, the King Halfdan. I don't know if that's
Halfdan?
It's spelled like Halfdan, like half of a Dan. But I don't know if that's how you say it, right?
Halfdan is so good.
How would you say it if you were a Viking? Halfdan.
Halfdan?
You think so?
I don't know.
Maybe.
I love Halfdan.
Yeah.
Just as like a concept.
Old King Halfdan.
Yeah, half of a Dan is like such an interesting concept.
Half of a Dan,
half of
all
a Dan.
heart.
Halfdan wholehearted.
Can't lose. The King of Norway is having some political issues. And he's like, I can either marry my only daughter, light of my life, Eurytea, I think. I could marry her off to some Swede or even a Dane if I have to. But I hate those guys. Yeah. So I might as well make this Ivar dude who showed up and everyone loves him and he's such a great warrior. I could marry her off to him. He's Norwegian. I'll make him a general and then he can marry my daughter. So he does that. Oh, great. And Ivar and Eurytea marry. They have a son and that son becomes a king. And between Ivar and his son, Norway rises to the height of its power during this time.
Does Ivar become king at some point?
No, his
Okay,
son
he
becomes
skipped.
king.
Okay.
Yeah, but I think, if I remember correctly, King Halfdan dies when, like, his grandson is pretty young. So I imagine
Got it.
Ivar did a lot of,
Tiny boy king.
Tiny boy king.
Tiny boy king is a fun thought.
Yeah, how cute.
Yeah.
Well, and it worked out great because Norway rises to the height of its power. And there's this great lineage of kings and warriors who are all born yada yada whatever.
Yeah.
Let's fast forward a little bit
Okay.
to the year 885.
Okay.
Vikings of various Scandinavian origin have been very coyly ravaging and pillaging northern coastal parts of France.
Mm-hmm.
They've been doing this for many years. And in 885, one fleet of Vikings was like, should we just sack Paris?
Oh, boy.
Like, what are we waiting for? We should just do it.
Oh, boy.
So this fleet sets out to sack Paris. And among them is a young man named Rollo, like the candy.
Yum.
But add an extra L, so Rollo. Rollo. He's sometimes known as Hrolf or Hrolf the Walker because he was so big that no horse could carry him, so he walked a lot.
Oh, that's sick.
Isn't that kind of cute?
That's really cute. Wow.
So Rollo is just like a lesser leader of this fleet. And he does come from the line of like Ivar, Halfdan, Eurytea. So he was like descended from that. But he himself did not become a king. He was not that big of a deal at this point. So for some unknown reason, he actually ran afoul of the current king of Norway. We don't know why. So he was like, I got to get out of here. He joins this fleet and he goes to sack Paris.
Do you think he was a bit of a scamp?
He probably was a bit of a scamp.
I like to think of him as a bit of a scamp.
He's like, no court can hold me. I'm going to go pillage Paris.
Well, and if you're so big that no horse can carry you, you're probably knocking into stuff. And
yeah. And you're like, what
scaring
transportation
people.
can hold me?
Yeah.
A ship.
A ship. Yeah.
A ship can hold
Gotta
me.
hit the waves.
Always. The fleet gets to Paris. They do a siege about it, but Paris is not having it. And they successfully rebuff the attack. And the Vikings go home with their tail between their legs.
Oh.
France is now becoming a bit of a white whale. This is the big fat one for Vikings. And they're tired. They're tired of conquering their old stomping grounds on the coast.
Yeah, they need something new and fresh.
They need something new and fresh. They want that Paris.
Mm-hmm.
But history does not seem to agree on any dates. But Rollo specifically is able to capture a northern city of, now help me pronounce this. We both took French.
Yeah.
Which is a very sad commentary on the American education system.
In some of our past episodes.
Yes. It's spelled Rouen. How would you pronounce that?
Rouen.
Ruin?
Yeah?
Ruin?
Yeah.
Sure.
Because like a roux, like ROU.
Yeah,
like
like
just
those-
be like roux. So
N.
ruin.
Ruin. Rollo is able to capture the city of Rouen and the surrounding region, which is known as Normandy. That one I do know how to pronounce.
Oh, yep.
This is on the northern coast of France. And he just chills in this city, hoping to branch out from there and start grabbing cities on the way to Paris. So he's got a bigger plan. He's not
Yeah.
just going straight for Paris. He's grabbing a couple things on the way.
Yeah, he's killing multiple old cities with one fleet.
Thank you. The old adage.
The old adage.
One such battle was in the city of Chartres in 911. Rollo attacked Chartres, but the forces of the French King Robert stop him. But then instead of sending Rollo back home, King Robert of France says, hey, what are we doing here?
Hey, you're a big guy.
You're a big
Come be
guy.
one of
I'm
my
a
big
guy.
guys.
Why don't we end all this dumb fighting?
All of it?
I'll forget you tried to take another one of my cities. If you just go back to Normandy, I'll legally acknowledge that you rule Normandy, but you rule it under me. So like he's going to give him the dukedom of Normandy.
Well, Norway, Normandy.
So yeah,
It makes perfect sense.
It's the aesthetic wise, it works out perfectly.
Yeah.
The catch is that Rollo has to bend the knee to King Robert. And he does.
Oh.
So
okay.
he bends the knee and
Okay.
Robert says, great, none of this ever happened. XOXO King Robert. Rollo becomes the Duke of Normandy.
You're
And
going to say the Duke of Hazard.
yeah, the Duke of
I
Hazard.
just auto-filled what you were about to say. Becomes the Duke of Hazard.
Yes.
Looks great in the shorts.
So good.
Yeah.
When he solidifies it, two important things happen. He agrees to marry a French woman, Gisela. She's the daughter of the previous French king. And then he also gets baptized into the Christian church. He changes his name to a Christian name, and the one he chooses is Robert. Which I feel like he's trolling King Robert. He probably wasn't, but he's like, he could steal France, so he just stole his name.
Yeah, that's kind of great.
Or it's also funny to think that, like, he just didn't know Christian names, and that's like the only Christian man he ever met.
Yeah.
So he's like, Robert's one. I know that one. So Rollo, who is now Robert, official ruler of Normandy, and he has a son, William. And he had William not by Gisela, his wife. Apparently Vikings had like their real wives that stayed put, and then they had like their away wives.
Cool.
And a lot of times the away wife was like someone they pillaged. Like
away wife.
Like they would take a woman from a village they pillaged
awful.
And put them on their boat and be like,
Awful.
that's also my wife. Yeah.
Awful.
Life was really cool for women.
Oh, God.
Always throughout history. So his away wife, who we don't know the name of, is the mother of William. And William becomes the next ruler of Normandy. So William and his children and so forth are the line of the dukes of Normandy. So up until we get to the mid 11th century, so we're fast forwarding a little bit more, we get to a man named William the Conqueror. Have you heard of William the Conqueror?
I think I have.
Probably from me. I talk about him a lot.
I feel like I mean, the Conqueror is a title that you don't forget.
It's true.
But have there been multiple the Conquerors?
No.
He's the one?
He's the guy.
Well, then, yeah, I've heard of him.
Well, actually, I think Russia had like some conquerors.
Oh,
They got to, right?
Got to. It's kind of funny that it's William the Conqueror, because that's just like
He's
just like a boy name.
He's just a guy.
Yeah.
It's like Brad the Conqueror.
Brad the
Chadwick
Conqueror.
the Conqueror.
I like Brad the Conqueror a lot.
He's
It's
a good
really
D&D
good.
character.
Yeah.
All right, so to recap, so we're following the line. Back in the 700s, we have Ivar, Eurytea, and then we fast forward to Rollo/Robert and his probably kidnapped wife. And then we have his son William, fast forward some more to William the Conqueror. So that's the line so far. We're in the mid 11th century. That's the thousands one.
Gotcha.
This lovely gentleman, William the Conqueror, is possibly one of the most, if not the critical figure of the modern Western world that we live in. Like, we would not be in the world that we live in if it wasn't for this guy, for better or for worse.
Yeah.
William is not like other boys.
Oh, I bet he's a special boy.
Well, that's because he had another name before he was known as William the Conqueror, which was
Wolo.
William the Bastard.
Oh. Yeah. Oh.
Old Willie was the son of the Duke of Normandy, but his mother was just some gal hanging around court and not the Duke's wife, which we're fast forward a couple generations from Viking tradition, where this was a little bit more serious than like someone being from, you know, the away wife and the king. This is a little more serious and the court doesn't like it. However, despite everyone being like, this guy should not get the dukedom after Pop dies, he ends up grabbing the seat in a very like political Game of Thrones-esque style.
Oh, well, I was
takeover.
going to say it's very nothing.
Yeah, Jon Snow, the bastard.
Bastard.
Exactly. He gets the throne.
Yeah.
And it's all great and everyone's probably fine
He
with
won
it.
the game.
Kim,
Yes.
I bet you're asking, what did William look like?
Always.
Thank you for asking.
Yeah.
Here is a likeness of William woven into the very famous Bayeux tapestry.
This is so cool.
Is it cool, or does he look like an absolute goof and a goon?
He's a clown. Here's the thing. I think if this was like made into real life right now, this would be high fashion.
You know, it really would. Like Balenciaga would put this out.
Absolutely, yes. With the big hat and all the like textures and the body suit, cat suit moment.
It is literally like the Balenciaga like full body suits.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love it. This is, and is he wearing goggles?
No, I think he just has blue eyeshadow.
Honestly, chic. The colors are so cool.
Is he riding his horse backwards? I think yes.
Oh, I didn't even realize. Yeah. Or standing on it.
I mean, it's hard to get joints right when you're weaving.
Without additional context, I couldn't tell you what's happening, but he's
Have you seen
chic.
Have you seen the bio tapestry? Like the whole thing?
No.
It's like it's very famous. It's probably like one of the oldest tapestries in the world. And it depicts the entire Battle of Hastings, which we're going to talk about.
Oh.
And actually, we do know from some historical writings that William the Conqueror was considered burly and strong, and he had a low voice. And the only bone that remains of him that we have is his femur bone. And that tells us that he was probably around 5'10", which I think for the time is actually like pretty tall. So listen to that, boys. 5'10" is pretty tall.
Pretty tall.
Don't worry about it. So that's cool stuff. The King of England at this time his name is Edward, and he's actually William's second cousin. So he's also descended from this Rollo line. Edward has no kids. So he was like, I've got an idea. What are we doing here? Let's consolidate power. And he's like, I'm going to give England to William. So then we'll have the dukedom of Normandy, and we'll have all of England. And Edward's father-in-law, whose name was Godwin, was like, absolutely not. Not in my house, not in my British house. And in 1066, after Edward dies, Godwin's son was crowned as the new king, despite what King Edward wanted. And William over in Normandy said, not today, Satan. And he channeled his Viking ancestors, and he got in a ship, and he sailed to England. And they had one of the most well-known battles in all of human history, the Battle of Hastings, which is what the famous bio tapestry depicts. William kicked butt, and he won the battle, as well as killed the current King of England, Godwin's son. And there is I didn't bring it up, but there's like a part of the bio tapestry that just shows him with like an arrow through his head.
Oh, how old was his son?
I have no idea.
Oh, probably a young boy.
Think about it. I wouldn't think about it.
Oh boy.
After that, William just casually walks up to London and says, mine.
Wow.
And he takes it.
The audacity.
Well, this victory and the takeover by William had long-lasting effects, basically laying the foundation for the medieval kingdom of England. And before William, the aristocracy was primarily Anglo-Saxon. But by the end of his reign, it was all primarily Norman or French.
Wow.
So William continued to do Duke stuff back in Normandy, but he was also the King of England. So that paved the way for close ties between England and France during the medieval era, very famously like allies during this time. So the English language also began its transformation into the language that we speak today, melding the Germanic language with French traits and vocabulary. So French is a Latin language, not Germanic, the way that English is.
Right.
And it's one of my favorite fun linguistic facts of all time.
I feel like we should have a little jingle for a linguistics fact.
Karyn's Linguistic Corner.
Oh my God.
Was that pretty good?
Talented.
I'm a musician. So this fun linguistic fact is that French integration in English can be traced to France's influence on the aristocracy in England. So William the Conqueror filled all the noble seats in England with his Norman friends who spoke French and kicked out all those dumb Anglo-Saxons.
Yeah, get him out of there.
But the common folk were still English. So a lot of times common simple things in the English language still have the English origin, but the fancy things have the French origin because that was the aristocracy. So for example, the names of livestock like cow, sheep, and pig, those are English origin words.
Got it.
But the names of the prepared food for these animals has a French origin, like beef, mutton, and pork. Because your common peasant couldn't afford to eat the meat, but they did have the job of tending to the future meals of nobles.
Whoa.
So yeah, it's like, so when you think of like simple things have that English origin, and that's why when we talk about how the English language is like really hard to conjugate, like what's the plural of sheep?
Sheep.
Exactly. So like that,
I really had to think about it.
It's like I was tricking
really
you.
Did
I'm
have to
not
think about it.
Tricking you.
Yeah.
There's a lot of weird stuff like that because the Old English language followed different rules, but French followed the like just tack a little S on it and call it a day.
Whoa.
That's why we have different like conjugation rules.
Cool.
I know. Linguistics are so fun.
Yeah, and so are linguists.
Yeah.
Because you're one of them.
Kind of. So you can thank William the Conqueror for English being really hard to learn.
Thank you.
Thank you so much,
Thank you,
William.
sir.
Anyway, I digress. Kim, we're getting close to the point of my story. I know I've taken you through centuries of ancient history.
I enjoy it, though. I like the
far back one.
far back.
Yeah. So let's get to the point of the story.
Yes.
William the Conqueror is descended from Rollo's son, William. But Rollo had another son named Walter. So William and Walter. Walter's grandson, who's also named Walter, accompanied William to England during his conquest. So as a reward, William gives Walter land and a title. The castle that Walter lived in England was called Ken Castle, Caen.
Oh,
I know, but isn't it fun? It's like Ken and Barbie, like Ken's Castle.
Go into I'm just Ken.
So Ken Castle.
Yeah.
And because he's French, he became known as Walter de Ken, Walter of Ken. So can you guess? Can you guess what name Walter's son might have gone by if Walter de Ken is his name?
I actually don't know how this would work. Walter of Ken.
Walter of Walter.
Wait, I don't know.
It would be de Ken's son, Walter de Ken's son.
Oh.
Do you see where I'm going?
Whoa, cool.
And therefore we get Dickinson.
Language is so neat.
It's Nito Burrito. So Dickinson.
Okay, yep.
This is all supposed. So
wait, is it though?
Well, I'll get there.
Okay.
So then the descendants of Nathaniel Dickinson of Massachusetts claim that he is a direct descendant of Walter de Ken. And they also implied that all Dickinsons everywhere come from this origin. Do you buy it?
Maybe.
Yeah. Do you buy that that all Dickinsons are from de Ken's son? It's shaky.
It's a little shaky. I don't really know how that would spread out after that. How many names did they have, really?
Yeah. It is a bit like saying every Smith comes from the same Smith.
Yeah.
Feels wrong.
That seems wrong.
Yeah. You're right to be suspicious of it, because now I'm going to disprove almost everything that I just told you in the last 20 minutes.
All of it, really?
Yeah.
Oh, no.
But it sounds cool, right?
You sold me on all of it.
But it's very cool
It's
to
very
be
cool.
like Walter de Ken Dickinson is like,
Yeah.
oh my God, now I'm related to every Viking that ever lived.
Yeah.
Very cool. Let's start with the easiest fact to disprove it. Everything before Rollo, all the Norwegian kings, the kidnapped shepherd on the hill, all of that is most likely mythological.
Yeah.
So that was written, all of those stories were written around the year 1220 by a medieval Icelandic historian. And the book that he wrote, I can't remember the name of it, it was written more like a saga than history.
Yeah.
So, and a lot of like Scandinavian writers were like that, where it would be, there might be historical truth in there, but it's written as like a saga, mythological. So you can't really like believe all of it. The first truly like recorded real person in this whole story is Rollo. He definitely existed. Before that, it's all a bit weird. The next claim was that Rollo had a son named Walter alongside his son named William. And then he's the grandfather of Walter de Ken. That claim is unsubstantiated other than by oral tradition. So oral tradition says that he had another son. There's no record that says that he ever had another son named Walter. The only proven children of Rollo are William and then some other guy named Gerlach. And with a name like that, you can see why he wasn't the famous son.
Could you get from Walter to Gerlach linguistically?
You try.
I know, yeah. I'm not the linguist.
There's no way.
Okay, all right.
All of the consonants are wrong.
Well, I don't know. I mean, we like to do a little bit of like puzzle solving.
Yeah.
In our free time and on this pod.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you know.
But I suppose that's like if you were putting like a jigsaw puzzle together with like a cryptogram. They're just not going to go together.
Okay.
So that one's a pretty damning one, that Walter may not have ever even existed. Yeah. Walter de Ken existed, but there is no proof that like he came from some descendant of Rollo.
Well, could Walter have been a bastard and that's why he's not recorded?
Maybe. But if he's not recorded, it's oral, like I said, it's oral tradition. Okay. And with oral tradition, it's like it's like, okay, maybe.
Yeah.
So The next fact is that Dickinson is a very common name, which we talked about a little bit. So the chance that every single Dickinson comes from one noble dude in the 11th century it's not super likely.
Mm-mm.
And then lastly, Dickon, spelled Dicun, is an older name or an older nickname for Richard. It's where we get the Dick from Richard. Like some Richards are called Dick, right? So Dickon was the even older nickname.
Oh.
So Dickon's son is Richard's son. And that's actually a lot more reasonable than Walter Dickon.
Oh, cool.
I know. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
And much more likely, I think. So those are all my facts to disprove it. I've led you down the guarded path, admittedly, because this theory of the Dickinsons is not one that's actually even entertained by serious genealogists in the modern day. In fact, the Nathaniel Dickon ancestry that this hullabaloo is all about can really only reliably be traced back to the year 1540. After that, records cease in its oral tradition. So there's no proof before 1540. But there is a valuable lesson here. And I think it's very telling that when I was doing like an earnest search for the origin of Dickinsons in America, the story came up over and over again. And it still comes up in like modern day forums. People are talking about it more than they're talking about these other more reasonable reasons. And I actually really had to dig around to find the places where people were disproving it. They were significantly overshadowed by the Viking tale, most famously perpetuated by the Dickinsons at their 1883 fancy reunion. But who could blame them for wanting to talk about Viking conquerors at this huge event they planned? It's a good story, and it's much more fun to think that that's the origin than that is, somebody in England was named Richard and he had a son, and that's where we came from. And also, it is interesting to me that like everyone wants to be like, I'm descendant from Vikings. It was just like, I don't know, maybe I was descended from a little shepherd boy on a Norway hill.
Yeah, Ivar.
Just like, I'm descended from Norwegians. Can we just be cool about that?
Just think about like what a lovely pastoral life you must lead as a little shepherd boy named Ivar.
Yeah.
As opposed to just like violence, slashing, stealing,
killing.
killing.
I think it is fascinating that it just turns right to like, no, I'm descended from Vikings. It's like,
so
I don't know, like there were some like just fishermen that were living in Norway.
You're not a Viking.
Yeah.
After centuries and centuries and centuries. Like that doesn't mean anything.
Yeah. But I think this definitely comes back to, we've talked about this, where like there's like a sense of disconnect between like where we were supposed to be and now where we are. And that I think leads to this like being enamored with the idea of like the old country and what that means. I think that's the point of this, is that we feel some kind of disconnect and there's like a desire to be a part of it, to be a part of what happened back there, because all we know is this like, we're Americans, we're made of like a little bit of everything kind of disconnect.
Yeah.
You buy it? You look like you don't buy it.
I buy it, but I'm also like, I don't know, just being enamored with a time that's just like fraught with violence, like doesn't do it for me.
I know.
I think that's like a pacifist. I'm just like a lover, not a fighter.
I'm a little bit of an empath.
Yeah, I'm a little bit of an empath.
I get it, but I think when people are picturing that time, they're always like centering themselves as like a main character.
Yeah.
So like none of the bad things would ever happen to them.
Yeah, that good old fashioned American individualism.
Exactly.
It's really serving all of us so well.
So if I was back in the Viking times, I would be really important.
Yeah.
That kind of talk. Yeah.
Sad.
I know. Well, it is. I mean, there's an escapism there, right? Like, it's just like a deep-seated unhappiness with the way things are here.
Yeah. Sad.
I know. Do you want to talk about your resonance, or was that it?
Well, I find it very interesting. And I also find that I may be contradicting myself, because I'm very interested in the Viking stuff, just because like it's so far away that it feels
cool as hell.
It just feels like fun fiction.
Yeah.
So it's like I'm interested in it, knowing full well that it's like, I mean, like the whole reason why I don't like history is that it feels incomplete to me sometimes.
Yeah.
And like
that's
it's
the
often,
most incomplete.
Yeah. And like it's recorded by sources who are biased, you know? So it's weird to me to think like, oh, I was so excited about Ivar, but like it could be all fake. Fakey fake.
And probably is.
But I think because it's so far away, and I think probably because of the way that like white media has glorified what was the movie that came out with one of the Skarsgårds? The
the
Norseman or
Yeah,
something?
yeah.
Like that reminded me of the story a little bit because he gets stolen and then he, becomes strong and he goes to vengeance. So like, I don't know. There's like, even though I can see that it's a little bit silly, like there is still a part of me that's been indoctrinated with this like Vikings, good, cool, strong.
Yeah.
And like snow and strength and power.
And you love that.
I love that. I don't know. It's just like, it's weirdly romantic.
It is. I mean, we've made it that way for sure. And also like, I've seen some like historians on TikTok put up photos of like Viking clothes that they've made from like real historical texts of like what it looked like versus like what the media does.
Oh, that's
and they
fun.
look so silly.
Yeah.
Because they look just like gnome men in the real thing, but then like the fake one is like the 6-pack is the costume.
Yep. Yeah. And I feel like Vikings and like Norse mythology goes into like other types of mythology. It's just like a hop, skip, and a jump away from like fairies and like medieval princes and it's all fantasy more than it's actually history.
Like
and maybe
real
that's the thing that people get their wires crossed about.
I don't
know. It's interesting. It's kind of cool.
It is kind of cool.
But it's also like, okay.
You know what I kept thinking about as like my media reference for this whole episode is Assassin's Creed Valhalla.
Oh, I haven't played it.
That's my favorite Assassin's Creed game, which is very controversial because it's definitely not the best one. But I freaking love it.
Yeah.
And you're just a Viking. And one of the characters in that game is Rollo.
Oh,
there's
cool.
There's a DLC that's like the sacking of Paris.
Cool.
And Rollo is like a side character.
That's sick.
Isn't that cool?
All I was thinking about
and I was like, Grandpa.
Papa.
It's my papa.
All I was thinking about was Skyrim and the Great Hall or whatever.
It is. And it is.
And see, that is like, okay, that's really rad.
Yeah.
But that's not real.
No. And I think like, as long as you're not being problematic, there can be something fun about placing yourself in this like world that we are disconnected from. This goes into my resonance, which is it's the desperate like human desire to be a part of something bigger than ourselves, something grand, something celebrated, which it very much is. We've already talked about my fear of obscurity. I'm not unique in that fear. It's what a lot of genealogists struggle with, I think, because they want to place themselves and attach themselves into the lives of these like important people, or possibly people who did something brave and heroic when like we just go to the office and like answer emails. Yeah. It feels like a cool thing to be a part of in some small way when like, I don't know, like Susie from HR is like in my DMs, you know?
In your DMs.
My work DMs.
Yeah, I know.
Pinging me on Slack.
Susie, stop flirting.
You crazy, Susie. This one in particular is like William the Conqueror and his victory at the Battle of Hastings. It can reasonably be attributed as like the start of the modern Western world as we know it. And I think when I first stumbled across this theory that I could possibly directly trace my ancestry all the way back to it and then further, like I jumped on it. I was so excited. And I think I even found myself like, when I found stuff to disprove it, was like, yeah, but like, what about this? And I kept like wanting to find the things that would prove it.
Yeah.
And it wouldn't. It just wouldn't. But it did give me an opportunity to look within at why I felt like I needed to be associated with it, why I needed that grandiosity. And the answer is obviously just ego. And that ego of like that genealogy work takes me further from why I started a podcast called Low Ancestry. The thing to be celebrated and the thing to be excited about is being like a part of the mundane and yet miraculous act of living that every person before us has done and that we are currently doing. And my ancestry doesn't need to be high, it doesn't need to be noble, just finding like the beauty, the flaws, and the complexity in the people who existed for me to exist. So Ivar the shepherd boy.
Love him.
He was just as important a person before he was kidnapped and turned into a great warrior and future general and father of kings.
Yeah.
He was important just being Ivar the shepherd boy.
Yeah.
And I think that's the point of what I want to do. But even I, who's morally flawless, wanted so badly to be part of this like brand ideology.
Yeah. I think maybe what I've been feeling so much about history so far, and what I feel often about people who glorify like founding fathers, like, yes, there is greatness in founding a country, you know, but also there's so much additional context. I think where I get tripped up, and I think what we're starting to actually break down here, is how the privilege of having access to your ancestry requires the willingness to suppress your ego and to go like, I'm going to maybe disprove this, or like, I'm maybe going to recognize like, yes, this is true. Yes, I'm related to these people. And though they did great things, they also did bad things. So I think like you are kind of going against what you've set the podcast up to do, which is to talk about like the greatness of low ancestry, but now you're finding the balance between the two.
Yeah.
And you went so far as to be like, I'm going to actually double check this before I start making big claims.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where I get into a little bit of frustration, I think, with like, but a little bit of, you know, the heritage, not hate argument.
Yeah.
Of still sort of glorifying the Confederacy.
Yeah.
Which is, I think, deeply troublesome, but also like extremely complicated to understand this need to be part of something and need to be connected to your ancestors and need to be connected to family history, etc. Like, if you're going so far as to make that connection, you also need to understand everything around you. And I'm doing everything I can not to say you exist in the context.
Yeah, you think you just fell out of a coconut tree.
But truly, I think that's the thing that you're doing that makes it maybe easier for me to relate to the thing that I have a problem with. Is like,
well,
it's
I mean,
advanced.
Well, I mean, that's what I want to do, right?
Yeah.
Like, oversimplification is the enemy of all, I think.
Yes. You can't glorify something that you are personally connected to without understanding. Like, yes, a person of low ancestry or a person who's not related to Ivar, well, Rollo, and is related to, you know, whatever. Like, yes, there could be a personal connection there. And like, yes, Ivar was just a shepherd. And if he hadn't become a great warrior, he would have just been a shepherd.
Yeah.
But I think maybe the reason why I don't have the same feeling about legacy that you do is that I realize, or I'm constantly aware of the fact that like every day I'm affecting someone, and to a fault. I think it's something I'm aware of.
No.
Something I think about far too often. But I think that that's the next level of this, and that's the ego that you were talking about, is like, if you're not aware of how often you are touching other people's lives, and if you're not aware that other people are existing at the same time as you, and you can't have that empathy for people who are not, you know, related to greatness, then all of this is not, you know, like, if you're so focused on the ego and the feeling connected to something, but you're not understanding that so much of the world was happening at the same time, like, you just have to think about all of the repercussions or the butterfly effects of people existing with people.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, where I'm able to be like, I don't need a legacy per se, because every day, like, I can do something that affects someone.
Yeah.
And that could be huge or it could be nothing. And then I have panic attacks about being good enough. So is that good?
Yep. Yeah, I mean, we all have our situations. All right, okay, we gotta get out of here. Okay, bye.
Thanks, Karyn. Bye. Low Ancestry is written and produced by Karyn Harding and co-hosted by me, Kim McMasters, with original music and audio engineering by Benjamin Malk. Original cover art was designed by Christina Swanson of Swansong Creative. Resources pertaining to today's episode and a link to the official bibliography can be found in our show notes or at our website, lowancestry.com. All research was conducted by Karyn, but she's been known to be wrong on occasion. So if you'd like to connect with Karyn or even send her a correction, you can email us at connect@lowancestry.com or find us on Instagram @lowancestry. Genealogy is, after all, a community effort. Thank you so much for listening, and if you like what you hear, don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. We'd love to hear from you, and frankly, we really need this.